Last time on A Christmas Carol Deep Dive, we finished up the second of the three spirits, and now we are moving into the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come portion of the story. This will all be in this one episode, and then on the next one, we will get to the final stave, the Christmas morning portion of the story. It's one of the most influential books ever written. Even if you've never read Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, you are familiar with it. My name is Collin, and I've loved this story for as long as I can remember. I'm going to be taking a look at all of the movie and TV adaptations of A Christmas Carol that I can, because I love the story that much. This is Scrooge, A Christmas Carol podcast. A Christmas Carol Deep Dive, The Last of the Spirits. So, we will hand it back over to Kyle Munley and the LibriVox recording of A Christmas Carol. LibriVox is a free source that has free public domain versions of public domain audiobooks. They are a great resource. Check them out if you haven't. There are multiple versions of many works, and this is the version of A Christmas Carol that I love. So that's just a free plug for something I love. I'm not sponsored by them or anything. I just use their books in this because they are free to use, and I recommend them because there are so many books you can listen to great audiobook versions of with great narrators. So check them out, and we will get back into A Christmas Carol with Stave 4, The Last of the Three Spirits.
Stave 4 of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Stave 4, The Last of the Spirits. The phantom slowly, gravely, silently approached. When it came near him, Scrooge bent down upon his knee, for in the very air through which the spirit moved it seemed to scatter gloom and mystery. It was shrouded in a deep black garment which concealed its head, its face, its form, and left nothing of it visible save one outstretched hand. But for this it would have been difficult to detach its figure from the night and separate it from the darkness by which it was surrounded.
Personifications of death go back to essentially the beginning of storytelling, as they are used to help people grapple with the inevitability of death. However, our common image of the Grim Reaper, a black-cloaked figure, often a skeleton, carrying a scythe, seems to have first appeared in the 14th century during the Black Plague, understandably. The term Grim Reaper is newer, though, first showing up in 1847. It's important to note that while The Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come is clearly inspired by the Grim Reaper, he does not exactly fit the image. There's no mention of a scythe, and the character is not a skeleton. Even though some adaptations hint at it being a skeleton or outright portray the character as one, like in Scrooge the Musical, Dickens only mentions a spectral hand. He mentions the hand many times, and there is never an indication it is just bones. Having Death, or the Grim Reaper, appear as a Christmas ghost is in line with Dickens' own views towards Christmas. In his 1851 essay, What Christmas Is as We Grow Older, Dickens wrote, quote, "Of all days in the year, we will turn our faces towards that city on Christmas Day, and from its silent hosts bring those we loved among us. City of the dead, in the blessed realm wherein we are gathered together at this time, and in the presence that is here among us, according to the promise, we will receive, and not dismiss, the people who are dear to us." Dickens believed it was important to honor the dead at Christmas time, and as we see, even his personification of death has good intention.
He felt that it was tall and stately when it came beside him, and that its mysterious presence filled him with a solemn dread. He knew no more, for the spirit neither spoke nor moved. "I am in the presence of the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come," said Scrooge. The spirit answered not, but pointed onward with its hand. "You are about to show me shadows of the things that have not happened, but will happen in the time before us," Scrooge pursued. "Is that so, spirit?" The upper portion of the garment was contracted for an instant in its folds, as if the spirit had inclined its head. That was the only answer he received. Although well used to ghostly company by this time, Scrooge feared the silent shape so much that his legs trembled beneath him, and he found that he could hardly stand when he prepared to follow it. The spirit paused a moment, as observing his condition, and giving him time to recover. But Scrooge was all the worse for this. It thrilled him with a vague, uncertain horror to know that behind the dusky shroud there were ghostly eyes intently fixed upon him, while he, though he stretched his own to the utmost, could see nothing but a spectral hand, and one great heap of black.
At least one adaptation misunderstands or deliberately twists what is said here and gives the ghost glowing eyes. It's not effective. This character relies heavily on the horror trope that what you don't see is much scarier than what you do because your imagination can conjure up anything. Scrooge is imagining the eyes looking at him from beyond the darkness, but he can't see them, so they're that much scarier.
"Ghost of the future," he exclaimed, "I fear you more than any spectre I have seen. But as I know your purpose is to do me good, and as I hope to live to be another man from what I was, I am prepared to bear your company, and do it with a thankful heart. Will you not speak to me?" It gave him no reply. The hand was pointed straight before them. "Lead on," said Scrooge, "lead on. The night is waning fast, and it is precious time to me, I know. Lead on, spirit." The phantom moved away as it had come towards him. Scrooge followed in the shadow of its dress, which bore him up, he thought, and carried him along. They scarcely seemed to enter the city, for the city rather seemed to spring up about them, and encompass them of its own act. But there they were, in the heart of it, on 'Change, amongst the merchants, who hurried up and down, and chinked the money in their pockets, and conversed in groups, and looked at their watches, and trifled thoughtfully with their great gold seals, and so forth, as Scrooge had seen them often.
So, this is one of two references in the story where the narrator says the phrase on change. Now, that refers not just to the Royal Exchange in London, but an actual alleyway called either Exchange Alley or sometimes shortened to Change Alley. Now, this was a shortcut between the Royal Exchange and a post office which was on Lombard Street. So this was a shortcut between the two places. A lot of stockbrokers would meet there, do their business. So when it says on change, both in the opening of the story and here, it's talking about Exchange Alley between those two. The Royal Exchange was on Cornhill. Now we get Cornhill referenced at the very beginning of the story when there's a slide there. The people slide down the ice at Cornhill, so that it's right outside the Royal Exchange. I've seen a lot of versions of this scene that have the men talking right outside the stock exchange. Of course, that's, right where it would be, but it's actually the street between the two places, which I think is really interesting. And he does mention that twice. So on change is not just some expression, it is actually a street change.
The spirit stopped beside one little knot of businessmen. Observing that the hand was pointed to them, Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk. "No," said a great fat man with a monstrous chin, "I don't know much about it either way. I only know he's dead." "When did he die?" inquired another. "Last night, I believe." "Why, what was the matter with him?" asked a third, taking a vast quantity of snuff out of a very large snuff-box. "I thought he'd never die." "God knows," said the first, with a yawn. "What has he done with his money?" asked a red-faced gentleman with a pendulous excrescence on the end of his nose that shook like the gills of a turkey-cock. "I haven't heard," said the man with the large chin, yawning again. "Left it to his company, perhaps. He hasn't left it to me. That's all I know." This pleasantry was received with a general laugh. "It's likely to be a very cheap funeral," said the same speaker. "For upon my life, I don't know of anybody to go to it. Suppose we make up a party and volunteer." "I don't mind going if a lunch is provided," observed the gentleman with the excrescence on his nose. "But I must be fed if I make one." Another laugh. Well, I am the most disinterested among you, after all, said the first speaker, for I never wear black gloves, and I never eat lunch. But I'll offer to go if anyone else will. When I come to think of it, I'm not at all sure that I wasn't his most particular friend, for we used to stop and speak whenever we met. Bye-bye. Speakers and listeners strolled away and mixed with other groups. Scrooge knew the men and looked towards the spirit for an explanation. The phantom glided on into a street. Its finger pointed at two persons meeting. Scrooge listened again, thinking that the explanation might lie here. He knew these men also, perfectly. They were men of business, very wealthy, and of great importance. He had made a point always of standing well in their esteem, in a business point of view, that is, strictly in a business point of view. "How are you?" said one. "How are you?" returned the other. "Well," said the first, "Old Scratch got his own at last, eh?"
Old Scratch is a name for the devil that probably derives from scrat, S-C-R-A-T, a Middle English term for a kind of goblin. In term, that derives from scrat, S-K-R-A-T-T-E, an Old Norse word for a wizard or goblin. Calling the devil Scratch or Old Scratch appears to have originated in New England, although it would later become more popular in the American South. The most famous use of the term is probably in The Devil and Daniel Webster, both the Stephen Vincent Benet short story and the 1941 film, where Walter Houston plays the character. It is more of a popular nickname in American folklore than British, so it's possible that Dickens learned it from Washington Irving, who used the name in his The Devil and Tom Walker, which itself was a major inspiration on The Devil and Daniel Webster.
"So I am told," returned the second. "Cold, isn't it? Seasonable for Christmas time? You're not a skater, I suppose?" "No, no. Something else to think of. Good morning." Not another word. That was their meeting, their conversation, and their parting. Scrooge was at first inclined to be surprised that the spirit should attach importance to conversations apparently so trivial. But feeling assured that they must have some hidden purpose, he set himself to consider what it was likely to be. They could scarcely be supposed to have any bearing on the death of Jacob, his old partner, for that was past, and this ghost province was the future. Nor could he think of any one immediately connected with himself to whom he could apply them. But nothing doubting that, to whomever they applied, they had some latent moral for his own improvement. He resolved to treasure up every word he heard, and everything he saw, and especially to observe the shadow of himself when it appeared. For he had an expectation that the conduct of his future self would give him the clue he missed, and would render the solution of these riddles easy. He looked about in that very place for his own image, but another man stood in his accustomed corner, and though the clock pointed to his usual time of day for being there, he saw no likeness of himself among the multitudes that poured in through the porch. It gave him little surprise, however, for he had been revolving in his mind a change of life, and thought and hoped he saw his newborn resolutions carried out in this. Quiet and dark, beside him stood the phantom, with its outstretched hand. When he roused himself from his thoughtful quest, he fancied from the turn of the hand and its situation in reference to himself that the unseen eyes were looking at him keenly. It made him shudder, and feel very cold. They left the busy scene, and went into an obscure part of town where Scrooge had never penetrated before, although he recognized its situation and its bad repute. The ways were foul and narrow, the shops and houses wretched, the people half naked, drunken, slipshod, ugly. Alleys and archways, like so many cesspools, disgorged their offences of smell and dirt and life upon the straggling streets, and the whole quarter reeked with crime, with filth, with misery. Far in this den of infamous resort there was a low-browed, beetling shop below a penthouse roof, where iron, old rags, bottles, bones, and greasy offal were bought.
So, awful is not a term that is used in the United States too often, but That is OFFAL, and it is a catch-all term for organ meat of animals. So livers, kidneys, things like that, of course. That is awful, and not describing the taste of it, AWFUL. It's just that is the name of that in the UK and countries where British English is more common.
Upon the floor within were piled up heaps of rusty keys, nails, chains, hinges, files, scales, weights, and refuse iron of all kinds. Secrets that few would like to scrutinize were bred and hidden in mountains of unseemly rags, masses of corrupted fat, and sepulchres of bones. Sitting in among the wares he dealt in, by a charcoal stove made of old bricks, was a grey-haired rascal, nearly 70 years of age, who had screened himself from the cold air without by a frosty curtaining of miscellaneous tatters hung upon a line, and smoked his pipe in all the luxury of calm retirement.
The character that Dickens is describing here, Old Joe, is what was known as a rag and bone man, although there were many different terms for this kind of person, including junk man. A rag and bone man would purchase, or just take, cheap items and either resell them or turn them into sellable items. A beetling shop is one term for his place of operation.
Scrooge and the Phantom came into the presence of this man, just as a woman with a heavy bundle slunk into the shop. But she had scarcely entered when another woman, similarly laden, came in too, and she was closely followed by a man in faded black, who was no less startled by the sight of them than they had been upon the recognition of each other. After a short period of blank astonishment, in which the old man with the pipe had joined them, they all three burst into a laugh. "Let the charwoman alone to be the first," cried she who had entered first. "Let the laundress alone to be the second, and the undertaker's man alone to be the third. Look here, old Joe, here's a chance, if we haven't all three met here without meaning it." "You couldn't have met in a better place," said old Joe, removing his pipe from his mouth. "Come into the parlor. You were made free of it long ago, you know, and the other two ain't strangers. Stop till I shut the door of the shop. Ah, how it shrieks! There ain't such a rusty bit of metal in the place as its own hinges, I believe, and I'm sure there's no such old bones here as mine. Ha ha!"
He's pointing out the irony that he makes metal into better things all day, but his door happens to have the worst metal in the whole city.
"We're all suitable to our calling. We're well matched. Come into the parlor. Come into the parlor." The parlor was the space behind the screen rags. The old man raked the fire together with an old stair-rod, and having trimmed his smoky lamp, for it was night, with the stem of his pipe, put it in his mouth again. While he did this, the woman who had already spoken threw her bundle on the floor and sat down in a flaunting manner on a stool, crossing her elbows on her knees and looking with a bold defiance at the other two. "What odds, then? What odds, Mrs. Dilber?" said the woman. "Every person has a right to take care of themselves. He always did." "That's true, indeed," said the laundress. "No man more so." "Why, then, don't stand staring as if you was afraid, woman. Who's the wiser? We're not going to pick holes in each other's coats, I suppose?" "No, indeed," said Mrs. Dilber and the man together. "We should hope not." "Very well, then," cried the woman. "That's enough. Who's the worse for the loss of a few things like these? Not a dead man, I suppose?" "No, indeed," said Mrs. Dilber, laughing. "If he wanted to keep 'em after he was dead, a wicked old screw," pursued the woman, "why wasn't he natural in his lifetime? If he had been, he'd have had someone to look after him when he was struck with death, instead of lying grasping out his last there, alone by himself." "It's the truest word that ever was spoke," said Mrs. Dilber. "It's a judgment on him." "I wish it was a little heavier judgment," replied the woman, "and it should have been, you may depend upon it. If I could have laid my hands on anything else, open that bundle, old Joe, and let me know the value of it. Speak out plain. I'm not afraid to be the first, nor afraid for them to see it. We know pretty well that we were helping ourselves before we met here, I believe. It's no sin. Open the bundle, Joe. But the gallantry of her friends would not allow of this, and the man in faded black, mounting the breach first, produced his plunder. It was not extensive. A seal or two, a pencil case, a pair of sleeve buttons, and a brooch of no great value were all. They were severely examined and appraised by old Joe, who chalked the sums he was disposed to give for each upon the wall, and added them up into a total when he found there was nothing more to come. "That's your account," said Joe, "and I wouldn't give another sixpence if I was to be boiled for not doing it. Who's next?" Mrs. Dilber was next. Sheets and towels, a little wearing apparel, 2 old-fashioned silver teaspoons, a pair of sugar tongs, and a few boots. Her account was stated on the wall in the same manner. "I always give too much to ladies. It's a weakness of mine, and that's the way I ruin myself," said old Joe. "That's your account. If you asked me for another penny and made it an open question, I'd repent for being so liberal and knock off half a crown." "And now undo my bundle, Joe," said the first woman. Joe went down on his knees for the greater convenience of opening it, and having unfastened a great many knots, dragged out a large and heavy roll of some dark stuff. "What do you call this?" said Joe. "Bed curtains?" "Ah!" returned the woman, laughing and leaning forward on her crossed arms. "Bed curtains! You don't mean to say you took 'em down, rings and all, with him lying there?" said Joe. "Yes, I do," replied the woman. "Why not?" "You were born to make your fortune," said Joe, "and you'll certainly do it." "I certainly shan't hold my hand when I can get anything in it by reaching it out, for the sake of such a man as he was, I promise you, Joe," returned the woman coolly. "Don't drop that oil upon the blankets now." "His blankets?" asked Joe. "Who else's, do you think?" replied the woman. "He isn't likely to take cold without 'em, I dare say." "I hope he didn't die of anything catching, eh?" said old Joe, stopping in his work and looking up. "Don't you be afraid of that," returned the woman. "I ain't so fond of his company that I'd loiter about him for such things if he did. Ah, you may look through that shirt till your eyes ache, but you won't find a hole in it, nor a threadbare place. It's the best he had, and a fine one, too. They'd have wasted it if it hadn't been for me." "What do you call wasting it?" asked old Joe. "Putting it on him to be buried in, to be sure," replied the woman with a laugh. "Somebody was fool enough to do it, but I took it off again. If calico ain't good enough for such a purpose, it isn't good enough for anything. It's quite as becoming to the body. He can't look uglier than he did in that one." Scrooge listened to this dialogue in horror, as they sat grouped about their spoil in the scanty light afforded by the old man's lamp. He viewed them with a detestation and disgust which could hardly have been greater, though they had been obscene demons, marketing the corpse itself. "Ha ha!" laughed the same woman, when old Joe, producing a flannel bag with money in it, told out their several gains upon the ground. "This is the end of it, you see. He frightened everyone away from him when he was alive, to profit us when he was dead. Ha ha ha!" "Spirit!" said Scrooge, shuddering from head to toe. I see. The case of this unhappy man might be my own. My life tends that way now. Merciful heaven, what is this?"
It's very clear at this point of the story that Scrooge knows exactly what's going on and is trying to bargain. Even after seeing the men at the exchange, he had a pretty good idea. I think a lot of people miss this and think it's supposed to be a twist that he's dead, as opposed to what is clearly being choreographed from the moment the ghost enters the scene. A lot of adaptations get this wrong, particularly the early TV adaptations and some of the shorter ones, particularly the half-hour ones. It really needs the time to play out properly. It's not just a revelation that he's dead, it's this sad reveal that he died alone, not loved by anyone. And just showing it that he's dead isn't really enough.
He recoiled in terror, for the scene had changed, and now he almost touched a bed, a bare, uncurtained bed, on which, beneath a ragged sheet, there lay something covered up, which, though it was dumb, announced itself in awful language. The room was very dark, too dark to be observed with any accuracy, though Scrooge glanced round it in obedience to a secret impulse, anxious to know what kind of room it was. A pale light, rising in the outer air, fell straight upon the bed, and on it, plundered and bereft, unwatched, unwept, uncared for, was the body of this man. Scrooge glanced towards the phantom. Its steady hand was pointed to the head. The cover was so carelessly adjusted that the slightest raising of it, the motion of a finger upon Scrooge's part, would have disclosed the face. He thought of it, felt how easy it would be to do, and longed to do it, but had no more power to withdraw the veil than to dismiss the spectre at his side. O cold, cold, rigid, dreadful death! Set up thine altar here, and dress it with such terrors as thou hast at thy command, for this is thy dominion. But of the loved, revered, and honored head, thou canst not turn one hair to thy dread purposes, or make one feature odious. It is not that the hand is heavy and will fall down when released. It is not that the heart and pulse are still, but that the hand was opened, generous and true, the heart brave, warm and tender, and the pulse a man's. Strike, shadow, strike, and see his good deeds springing from the wound to sow the world with life immortal. No voice pronounced these words in Scrooge's ears, and yet he heard them when he looked upon the bed.
Despite how they sound, these words are not biblical nor are they Shakespeare. They're actually original to Dickens' text, but they do sound like something much older and more formal. Is Scrooge hearing the ghost communicating in some way? Is he having these thoughts himself? Is it something else entirely?
He thought, if this man could be raised up now, what would be his foremost thoughts? Avarice? Hard-dealing, griping cares? They have brought him to a rich end, truly. He lay in the dark, empty house, with not a man, a woman, or a child to say that he was kind to me in this or that, and for the memory of one kind word I will be kind to him. A cat was tearing at the door, and there was a sound of gnawing rats beneath the hearthstone. What they wanted in the room of death, and why they were so restless and disturbed, Scrooge did not dare think. "Spirit," he said, "this is a fearful place. In leaving it, I shall not leave its lesson, trust me. Let us go." Still the ghost pointed with an unmoved finger to the head. "I understand you, Spirit," Scrooge returned, "and I would do it if I could, but I have not the power, Spirit. I have not the power." Again it seemed to look upon him. "If there is any person in this town who feels emotion caused by this man's death," said Scrooge, quite agonized, "show that person to me, Spirit, I beseech you." The phantom spread its dark robe before him for a moment, like a wing, and withdrawing it, revealed a room by daylight, where a mother and her children were. She was expecting someone, and with anxious eagerness, for she walked up and down the room, started at every sound, looked out from the window, glanced at the clock, tried, but in vain, to work with her needle, and could hardly bear the voices of the children in their play. At length the long-expected knock was heard. She hurried to the door and met her husband, a man whose face was careworn and depressed, though he was young. There was a remarkable expression in it now, a kind of serious delight of which he felt ashamed, and which he struggled to repress. He sat down to the dinner that had been hoarding for him by the fire, and when she asked him faintly what news, which was not until after a long silence. He appeared embarrassed how to answer. "Is it good news," she said, "or bad?" To help him. "Bad," he answered. "Are we quite ruined?" "No. There is hope yet, Caroline." "If he relents," she said, amazed. "There is. Nothing is past hope, if such a miracle has happened." "He is past relenting," said her husband. "He is dead." She was a mild and patient creature, if her face spoke truth, but she was thankful in her soul to hear it, and she said so with clasped hands. She prayed forgiveness the next moment and was sorry, but the first was the emotion in her heart. "What the half-drunken woman whom I told you of last night said to me, when I tried to see him and obtain a week's delay, and what I thought was a mere excuse to avoid me, turns out to have been quite true. He was not only very ill, but dying then. To whom will our debt be transferred? I don't know, but before that time we shall be ready with the money, and even though we were not, it would be a bad fortune indeed to find so merciless a creditor in his successor. We may sleep tonight with light hearts, Caroline." Yes, soften it as they would, their hearts were lighter. The children's faces, hushed and clustered round to hear what they so little understood, were brighter, and it was a happier house for the man's death. The only emotion that the ghost could show him, caused by the event, was one of pleasure.
This scene is almost never adapted. It makes sense to a point, as a lot of adaptations focus solely on the fact that Scrooge is dead, not the fact that he dies lonely and hated by all. The men talking outside the exchange and the junk dealer gradually show that it's Scrooge who's died, but this scene is mostly just twisting the knife. Scrooge desperately wants to see someone who is emotional that he died, and the ghost shows him someone who is happy. The first adaptation to include a version of this scene, as I've talked about, is Scrooge 1970, which turns this scene of restrained and remorseful joy into unrepentant jubilation with "Thank you very much." In that scene, a lot of the characters who are singing the song are characters we met in the very beginning of the film when Scrooge was collecting money from them, so we have a connection to them already. Here, we have not met Caroline and her husband before, and we don't see them again, so it's an easy scene to cut for that reason, too. The 1969 Australian version keeps the request of showing emotion towards this man's death, but the ghost then shows him the Cratchits because that version doesn't understand the work in the slightest. The only version so far that keeps this scene as written is the 1977 Michael Hordern adaptation, because that was just clearly trying to keep as many things as possible. There are later versions that will include it as well, but it's still a pretty infrequent scene to adapt.
"Let me see some tenderness connected with a death," said Scrooge, "or that dark chamber spirit which we left just now will be for ever present to me." The ghost conducted him through several streets familiar to his feet, and as they went along, Scrooge looked here and there to find himself, but nowhere was he to be seen. They entered poor Bob Cratchit's house, the dwelling he had visited before, and found the mother and the children seated round the fire. Quiet, very quiet. The noisy little Cratchits were as still as statues in one corner, and sat looking up at Peter, who had a book before them. The mother and her daughters were engaged in sewing, but surely they were very quiet. And he took a child, and set him in the midst of them. Where had Scrooge heard those words? He had not dreamed them. The boy must have read them out, as he and the spirit crossed the threshold. Why did he not go on?
This brief snippet is from the biblical book of Mark, chapter 9, verse 36. In the greater context of the story, the disciples have just been fighting about who is the greatest, and Jesus tells them that one must make themselves like a child to be first in his kingdom. It's a lesson in humility, which Scrooge is also getting right now. It's a concept the Cratchits all know pretty well.
The mother laid her work upon the table and put her hand up to her face. "The color hurts my eyes," she said. "The color? Ah, poor Tiny Tim." "They're better now," said Cratchit's wife. "It makes them weak by candlelight, and I wouldn't show weak eyes to your father when he comes home for the world. It must be near his time. Past it, rather, Peter answered, shutting up his book. But I think he has walked a little slower than he used these last few evenings, Mother. They were very quiet again. At last she said, and in a steady, cheerful voice that only faltered once, "I have known him to walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder very fast indeed." "And so have I," cried Peter, "often." "And so have I," exclaimed another. So had all. "But he was very light to carry," she resumed, intent upon her work. "And his father loved him so that it was no trouble, no trouble. And there is your father at the door." She hurried out to meet him, and little Bob in his comforter, he had need of it, poor fellow, came in. His tea was ready for him on the hob, and they all tried who should help him to it most. Then the two young Cratchits got upon his knees and laid, each child a little cheek against his face, as if they said, "Don't mind, father, don't be grieved." Bob was very cheerful with them, and spoke pleasantly to all the family. He looked at the work upon the table and praised the industry and speed of Mrs. Cratchit and the girls. They would be done long before Sunday, he said. "Sunday? You went today, then, Robert?" said his wife.
All right, let's talk a little bit about Victorian funeral practices and burial traditions. I'll link the sources in the episode description as I always do, but keep in mind with this particular topic, there's a lot more you can read. Quite a rabbit hole to go down. I'm just going to scratch the surface of what's relevant here. When someone died, their body would be kept at home until burial. Undertaking was a profession then as it is now, and there are undertakers mentioned in the book, but bodies would be kept in the home until the funeral. Friends and family would come to bid goodbye to their loved one, and it was seen as a loving tribute to the deceased. If you were unaware of these customs, it would be confusing to hear Bob Cratchit say that he went to see the grave and then read that he goes upstairs to see the body. Further complicating the matter is that a lot of adaptations leave in the scene of him talking about visiting the grave, but don't show Tiny Tim's body. The 1935 film with Seymour Hicks is a rare exception. Here are a few other things that the deceased's family might do in their home. Clocks would be stopped on the exact minute the loved one died. Mirrors would be covered up so spirits were not trapped in them. I'm sure you know at least one or two suspicions involving mirrors. And when the body left the house, it would be carried head first, so its spirit could not take others with it.
"Yes, dear," returned Bob. "I wish you could have gone. It would have done you good to see how green the place is. But you'll see it often. I promised him that I would walk there on a Sunday. My little, little child," cried Bob. "My little child." He broke down all at once. He couldn't help it. If he could have helped it, he and his child would have been farther apart perhaps than they were. He left the room and went upstairs into the room above, which was lighted cheerfully, and hung with Christmas. There was a chair set close beside the child, and there were signs of someone having been there lately. Poor Bob sat down in it, and when he had thought a little and composed himself, he kissed the little face. He was reconciled to what had happened, and went down again, quite happy. They drew about the fire and talked, the girls and mother working still. Bob told them of the extraordinary kindness of Mr. Scrooge's nephew, whom he had scarcely seen but once, and who, meeting him in the street that day, had seen that he looked a little, just a little down, you know, said Bob. Inquired what had happened to distress him. On which, said Bob, for he is the pleasantest spoken gentleman you ever heard, I told him, "I am heartily sorry for it, Mr. Cratchit," he said, "and heartily sorry for your good wife. By the by, how he ever knew that, I don't know." "Knew what, my dear?" "Why, that you were a good wife," replied Bob. "Everybody knows that," said Peter. "Very well observed, my boy," cried Bob. "I hope they do. Heartily sorry," he said, "for your good wife. If I can be of any service to you in any way," he said, giving me his card, "that's where I live. Pray come to me." Now it wasn't, cried Bob, for the sake of anything he might be able to do for us, so much as for his kind way, that this was quite delightful. It really seemed as if he had known our Tiny Tim, and felt with us. "I'm sure he's a good soul," said Mrs. Cratchit. "You'd be surer of it, my dear," returned Bob, "if you saw and spoke to him. I shouldn't be at all surprised, mark what I say, if he got Peter a better situation." "Only hear that, Peter!" said Mrs. Cratchit. "And then," cried one of the girls, "Peter will be keeping company with someone, and setting up for himself." "Get along with you," retorted Peter, grinning. "It's just as likely as not," said Bob, "one of these days. Though there's plenty of time for that, my dear. But however and whenever we part from one another, I am sure we shall none of us forget poor Tiny Tim, shall we? Or this first parting that there was among us." "Never, father!" cried they all. "And I know," said Bob, "I know, my dears, that when we recollect how patient and how mild he was, although he was a little, little child, we shall not quarrel easily among ourselves, and forget poor Tiny Tim in doing it." "No, never, father!" they all cried again. "I am very happy," said little Bob. "I am very happy." Mrs. Cratchit kissed him, his daughters kissed him, the two young Cratchits kissed him, and Peter and himself shook hands. "Spirit of Tiny Tim, thy childish essence was from God." "Spectre," said Scrooge, "something informs me that our parting moment is at hand. I know it, but I know not how. Tell me what man that was whom we saw lying dead." The ghost of Christmas yet to come conveyed him, as before, though at a different time, he thought. Indeed, there seemed no order in these later visions, save that they were in the future, into the resorts of businessmen, but showed him not himself. Indeed, the spirit did not stay for anything, but went straight on, as to the end just now desired, until besought by Scrooge to tarry for a moment.
Tiny Tim's death is objectively set 1 year in the future. The Ghost of Christmas Present says that not another of his race will find Tiny Tim alive unless things change. As for the rest of this, we're left to guess when these events will happen. A lot of versions seem to suggest it's all the same year, but this portion seems to say that it actually isn't. Again, the point of the visions isn't that Scrooge will die, we all die. It's that Scrooge dies unwanted and pathetically.
"This court," said Scrooge, "through which we hurry now, is where my place of occupation is, and has been for a length of time. I see the house. Let me behold what I shall be in days to come." The spirit stopped. The hand was pointed elsewhere. "The house is yonder," Scrooge exclaimed. "Why do you point away?" The inexorable finger underwent no change. Scrooge hastened to the window of his office and looked in. It was an office still, but not his. The furniture was not the same, and the figure in the chair was not himself. The phantom pointed as before. He joined it once again, and wondering why and whither he had gone, accompanied it until they reached an iron gate. He paused to look round before entering. A churchyard. Here, then, the wretched man whose name he had now to learn lay underneath the ground. It was a worthy place, walled in by houses, overrun by grass and weeds, the growth of vegetation's death, not life, choked up with too much burying, fat with repleted appetite. A worthy place.
The phrase "a worthy place" appears to have a double meaning here, as on one hand it's sarcastic, this is anything but a worthy place, all dead and overgrown. But on the other hand, it is a place worthy of the life Scrooge has lived up until this point.
The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to one. He advanced towards it, trembling. The phantom was exactly as it had been, but he dreaded that he saw new meaning in its solemn shape. "Before I draw nearer to that stone to which you point," said Scrooge, "answer me one question. Are these the shadows of things that will be, or are they shadows of things that may be only?" Still the ghost pointed downward to the grave by which it stood. "Men's courses will foreshadow certain ends, to which, if persevered in, they must lead," said Scrooge. "But if the courses be departed from, the ends will change. Say it is thus with what you show me." The spirit was immovable as ever. Scrooge crept towards it, trembling as he went, and following the finger, read upon the stone of the neglected grave his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge. "Am I that man who lay upon the bed?" he cried upon his knees. The finger pointed from the grave to him, and back again. "No, spirit! Oh, no, no!" The finger still was there. "Spirit!" he cried, tight clutching at his robe, "hear me! I am not the man I was. I will not be the man I must have been but for this intercourse. Why show me this if I am past all hope?" For the first time the hand appeared to shake. "Good spirit," he pursued, as down upon the ground he fell before it, "your nature intercedes for me and pities me. Assure me that yet I may change these shadows you have shown me by an altered life." The kind hand trembled.
Scrooge asks these hypothetical questions over and over, and yet the spirit remains unmovable because he's not personalizing them. As soon as Scrooge actually says he'll change, the hand starts to shake and tremble. The hand is shaking because, yes, the future is changing for him. When he actually repents of the man he was and says he'll become a new man, he sees things changing for him. There's also the choice Dickens makes here to say the ghost has a kind hand. It may seem a bit odd at first, but it comes right after Scrooge says, "Your nature intercedes for me and pities me." Even when Scrooge first meets the ghost, he acknowledges both that he is afraid of him and that he knows the ghost's intention is to do him good. So it would have a kind hand.
"I will honor Christmas in my heart, and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone." In his agony he caught the spectral hand. It sought to free itself, but he was strong in his entreaty, and detained it. The spirit, stronger yet, repulsed him. Holding up his hands in a last prayer to have his fate reversed, he saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost. End of Stave 4.
So that is it for the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come portion of the story. A good bit of it is pretty straightforward, but there is still a lot to cover, and I was glad to go over some of that. I know the burial tradition stuff is easy to lose in the mix because, like I said, so many adaptations don't include Tiny Tim's body. And I mean, I understand why they don't. On one hand, very, very shocking, especially if you're doing a movie for kids, to have the body of a dead child in a room. On the other hand, I have heard a stage actor who played Scrooge talk about this, saying they did it one year. They had the actor portraying the dead body of Tiny Tim, and it got laughs instead of tears or horrified emotion. It just got laughs because it looked kind of silly. So I understand why they don't do it. I just think that leads to some of the confusion as to why when people read the book after seeing adaptations, they say, wait, he just said he's going to go see the stone, or he just went and saw the stone, and now he's going upstairs to see the body. Which is it? It's because they're planning the burial, and until they do, the body stays in the house per Victorian tradition. So, like I said, long rabbit hole you can go down. Plenty of interesting traditions and customs and superstitions and all that. If that's something you're interested in, check out the links, do some more research on that. Because, yeah, it's a really interesting topic. I think of the whole story, this is the part that the most adaptations get wrong. Almost every adaptation of A Christmas Carol, even the really good ones, tend to get either past, present, or yet to come wrong. Very, very few get them all right. When we get to my favorite version, that's one that gets, in my opinion, gets them all right. There are others that get them all right as well. Even the Alistair Sim one kind of butchers the future segment. It starts with the Cratchits, then it goes to Old Joe, and then finally we hear the men talking outside the exchange. It's probably trying to build up tension, but again, that's not the point of the story. And for a movie that gets a whole lot right, it's really disappointing that the Alistair Sim one gets the future wrong. There are very few that get them all right. Even the really good ones, talking about some of my favorites so far. The Richard Williams short, it makes the past just too short. And again, 25 minutes, but it misses out on something by doing so. So even the best adaptations so far, the direct adaptations, the ones that are going for what's in the book, managed to get it wrong. And it's a shame because it's a great portion of the story. It's haunting and revealing and more introspective than I think a lot of the adaptations will show. They go for more shock when it's much more quiet, unsettling horror and deep, deep sadness. Again, it's fascinating that Mr. Magoo is probably the one that got it the most right so far. And again, I'm only saying of the direct adaptations. I think the Henry Winkler American Christmas Carol really captures the spirit of loneliness that the other ones can't quite get. So there are good ones coming that do the future right. Again, I think of my favorite that does it really, really well. But yeah, I hope there was something you perhaps learned from this or were able to think about it in a new way. Before doing this, I did not even know the whole thing about exchange alley. That's new information to me. I thought that was pretty interesting. I had never really even considered what that phrase might have meant, but I did a deep dive on it, and it turns out that, yeah, it was that alley between two other streets. Very interesting stuff. And like I said, next time I will be back with the final episode in A Christmas Carol deep dive. I hope you've been enjoying this. I know I have. And after that, we have one more month, and then we are going into season 2 because it'll be November. So, one episode before that, I'll let you know next time what that one's going to be. But we are looking forward to November because in November, season 2 of Scrooge, A Christmas Carol podcast, from Mickey Mouse to the Muppets, we're going from the 1980s all the way up through 1992. A lot of big ones to cover there. So, that's going to be season 2 of this podcast. That's what we have to look forward to. Thank you for listening to Scrooge, A Christmas Carol podcast. Scrooge, A Christmas Carol podcast is written, edited, and hosted by Collin Murr. Theme music is Christmas Day by TRG Banks. The LibriVox audiobook in this episode is A Christmas Carol read by Kyle Munley. Leaving a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify, as well as liking, commenting, and subscribing on YouTube will be a big help to me. I'll be back next month with another episode of Scrooge, A Christmas Carol podcast. Until then, make sure to live in the past, the present, and the future, and ensure that the spirits of all three strive within you.